Hi guys, welcome back to the Curly Reader. Today I want to go over with you all of the books that I added to my TBR in the month of August. So each month I try to share with you all of the books that I add to my Goodreads TBR during that month and where I got those suggestions from. Where am I finding the books from that I'm adding to my TBR? Kind of what's influencing what I read. And so this month I added 10 books to my TBR, which I feel like is a good number. I read more than 10 books this month, so it's evening itself out, I guess. So the first book that I want to share with you is The Last Train to London by Meg Waite Clayton. And this is a World War II historical fiction about a very affluent Jewish boy who is trying to escape, and he's trying to flee to London, I believe. I heard about this book on Ink and Paper's video titled 5 Historical Fiction Titles for Your TBR. And it sounded really interesting to me. I really love World War II historical fiction, and I thought that this would be one that I might really enjoy. Another one that I heard about on the same video is At the Wolf's Table by Rosella Postorino. It's an O, not an I. And this is one about a girl who is basically a taste tester for Hitler. There's a group of women, I think it's all women, that basically eat all of his food 24 hours before he eats it to make sure there's no poison in it. And it's just her experience getting to know some of the other women she's in there with. And yeah, so that sounded really interesting as well. Another World War II historical fiction that sounded interesting, and he really, really recommended both of those books. So they both sounded great. The next one that I added to my TBR is Saving Meghan by DJ Palmer, and I heard about this one from Lindsay's Little Library, and it was in her recent reading wrap-up video. And this is about a 15-year-old girl who's in and out of hospitals, and kind of when things kind of take a turn, the doctors suspect Munchausen syndrome by proxy, which is a behavioral disorder where you feel like someone is sick and so you're making them sick. So yeah, and it's "Can you love someone to death" is the tagline, and so it just sounded really interesting. I know there was just a Hulu, I think, series about a real case of this when this really happened, and so yeah. That one sounded really good. The next one that I added to my TBR is The Book Woman of Troublesome Creek by Kim Michelle Richardson. And this is one that I heard about from Krista at Books and Jams from her Instagram account. She posted it there first. I think she's also talked about it since then in a reading wrap up, but I added it when she posted it on Instagram. It sounded really good. It is I believe it's historical fiction, but it is about the blue people of the Appalachian, and it's all about Appalachian poverty, and I think a traveling library maybe. And so yeah, it sounded really, really good. I listened to Hillbilly Elegy earlier this year, which is a nonfiction book that also talks about Appalachian poverty. And so because I kind of been introduced to it through that, I thought that this sounded like a really interesting read. So I added that one. The next one that I added is Nest by Esther Ehrlich. And this is one that I saw at my library, and it was a total cover ad. The cover stuck out to me, which I've mentioned before. Middle grade covers will get me every single time because they're so good. And yeah, I'm a sucker for a good cover. But anyway, this one is a middle grade book, and it is set in 1972, and it's about a little girl whose mom has developed symptoms of a serious disease. And the girl finds comfort in watching wild birds. And she finds friends, and it's just kind of about how she and her friend create a private world and their imagination, and how they use that to deal with what's really going on in her life. And so it just sounded really good. And like I said, this cover is so good. So anyway, I added that one. And then I also added The Inventor Secret by Andrea Kremer, and I heard about this one from Bookishly Mandy in her video, 5 Books That Deserve More Love. And this one is an alternative history steampunk about the Revolutionary War. So it's like if we would have lost the Revolutionary War, how would things have been different? but also with a side of steampunk, which sounded interesting to me. This is one that I don't know when I'll get to it, but it still sounded kind of good, so I added this one. Next, I added Not Your Sidekick by CB Lee, and I heard about this one from Monica Kim's video that she did called DMing Authors to Pick My TBR, which was an amazing video idea, by the way, Monica, which I know she's not watching this, but you should go watch her video because it was a really good idea. Anyway, and this one, the synopsis of it reminded me a lot of Renegades by Marissa Meyer. It's a fantasy, sci-fi, whatever, where people have superpowers. Like superheroes are real and villains are real. And when you have superpowers, are you a superhero? Are you a villain? Who's really the villain? All of that. It is YA, which is not my huge forte anymore, but it sounded really interesting and she really loved it and talked really great about it. And so I figured I'd throw it on my list and give it a try. I then added The Home for Erring and Outcast Girls by Julie Kibler. And this is one that I heard about or originally saw from a magazine I found at my library. So my library has like where you check things out at a stack of flyers, basically, or pamphlets that are all like, here's a bunch of book reviews for the season and different synopsises of different things and top 5 books for your book club and, you know, just different things like that. And so I was looking through this and I actually have 3 books on this list. The last 3 books on this list are all from this magazine. That's how easily I'm influenced. But this was one of them. And this is in the turn of the 20th century in Texas. There's a home for the redemption and protection of erring girls. And it is kind of for young women who have been consigned to the dangerous poverty of the streets by birth, circumstance, or personal tragedy. And it's just kind of what happens in these women's lives. And then it says, when Lizzie Bates and Maddie McBride meet there, one is sick and abused and desperately clinging to her young daughter. The other one is jilted by the beau who fathered her ailing son. They form a friendship. And then it says a century later, there's a university librarian who uncovers the hidden histories of the 2 troubled women as she stumbles upon the cemetery on the home's former grounds and begins combing through its archives. So it sounds like it might be dual timeline. It sounded really, really interesting and really, really good. So yeah, that one went on my TBR immediately. Another one that I found through that same magazine is The Secrets We Kept by Laura Prescott. And since then, I've also seen this a lot on Bookstagram. But this is set during the Cold War. And it says a thrilling tale of secretaries turned spies, of love and duty, and of sacrifice, inspired by the true story of the CIA plot to infiltrate the hearts and minds of the Soviet Russia, not with propaganda, but with the greatest love story of the 20th century, Dr. Zhivago. So that sounded so good to me. I am a huge fan of the TV show The Americans, which if you have not seen that, you should go find it and watch it because it is amazing. It is set in the 1980s, Cold War, and it's about Russians who come to the United States and live in the United States as Americans and are spies. And it is so good. So anyway, that's kind of where I have gotten my obsession with Cold War and all of this. I'm not a huge fan of like Russian history, but I love Cold War era stuff. And so this sounded right up my alley. And then the last one that I added from that same magazine is The Downstairs Girl by Stacy Lee. And this says that by day, 17-year-old Jo Kwan works as a lady's maid for the cruel daughter of one of the wealthiest men in Atlanta. But by night, Jo moonlights as the pseudonymous author of a newspaper advice column for the genteel Southern lady. When her column becomes wildly popular, she uses the power of the pen to address some of society's ills, but she's not prepared for the backlash that follows when her column challenges fixed ideas about race and gender. And so that sounded really, really good. And I think that it is a bit historical. Yeah, it is historical fiction. I'm not 100% sure when it's set, but yeah, so that sounded really, really good as well. So anyway, those are the 10 books that I added to my TBR this month. If any of these are on your TBR, or if you've read any of them, let me know down below what you thought of them. Hopefully you were able to find some good gems here that you might add to your TBR as well. I know this is always a fun way for me to kind of go through and reevaluate what I'm putting on my TBR and why, and remembering some of the ones that I was really excited about, and hopefully get to them sooner rather than later. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that you stick around and subscribe. And as always, see you later.